All right, what's up, guys? So somebody suggested I do a tier list on the FTL ships, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. Actually, I really like tier lists, and I think it could be pretty fun. So with that, we're going to be actually doing this. This is a tier list made by this guy, Vent20171. I did not make it, but I found it. And we're just going to be going through each of them in order here and putting them where I think they belong. You know, some of them, like, I don't play boarding ships as much, but I do see the value of them and how good they are. And so we're going to just be kind of doing mostly subjectively how I feel, how good they are, but also, you know, with how good they really are, right? So let's just start off with the Kestrel. The Kestrel, I think, is an easy A tier. It's not the best ship in the game, but it has a pretty decent layout. And it starts with a Burst Laser Mark II. Any ship that starts with a Burst Laser Mark II is really, really good. And that keeps it, you know, pretty high. It has a lot of space for systems, for weapons, everything like that. There's a reason it's the starting ship, right? It is definitely, it's powerful. I would say its biggest weakness really is the fact that it only has 3 human crew members, which is like, you know, there's like 1-2 blue events in the game that even have humans necessary, and humans are pretty boring. But still, having said that, it's pretty decent. You know, there's a reason it's the default ship. It's meant to help you out early game. All right, Engi, I think, is a little worse, but I still think it's pretty good. So I'm going to put it in B tier here. The main reasons, it has a couple Engi crew, which is really, really good. The room layout is a little weird, but it's not bad. It's, you know, a bizarre circle kind of deal. I think the thing that holds it back the most is that you have to use drones right off the bat. In terms of, you have a combat drone and an Ion Blast. The Ion Blast 3, or whatever it is, whatever the Ion weapon it has is really, really good. And you can use until the late game, definitely. So I think that's definitely a boon for it. Having used the drone early on is kind of annoying because you can't really control where it shoots, which is a bummer, obviously. But still, you know, it gets the job done, and once you get past that early reliance on the drone, you're usually sitting pretty good. So I think it's a solid B tier. I definitely wouldn't mind using it. All right, Federation Cruiser A, my favorite ship in the game. I think it's an S tier for a couple reasons. One, it starts with an awesome crew. It has a Mantis, a human, a Rock, and an Engi, I'm pretty sure. Just, like, amazing. It doesn't have a Zoltan, which is one of the other best races, but it's still really, really good. Has a great crew. The layout is actually really, like, I don't know, it's just easy to vent things, to get your crew moving around. It's got big rooms, lots of space, lots of weapons, which is awesome. Plus it has the artillery beam, which is, like, just really, really good. You know, when I build runs with the Federation A, I don't build that necessarily around the artillery beam, you know, having it be like, do you the bulk of your damage and then just have defensive weapons. I don't really do that. But I like to have that powered on just as kind of a, you know, bonus damage that comes in every, you know, so whatever seconds you have it powered up as. So I don't rely on the beam for damage. Like, you can do that. You can do that in runs, but I don't entirely do that. But I do think it's super powerful. And I said it in the video I played with this ship, where I beat the flagship with it. If you're starting out, I think this is one of the best ships to really get going. So that's the Federation A. Zoltan A, I'm going to be honest, I think is another S tier ship. All the Zoltan ships have the Zoltan shield, which is just so good. It's just so good. I mean, it negates 5 damage every single fight, and lets you just, you know, most ships you come up against, if you take damage, it's going to be in the first, like, volley from the enemy, usually. And this just completely negates that. You get the cloaking as well, and this ship is, like, almost unhittable. It starts with the Ion Blast, I think, or something, it starts with the halberd beam and then, like, a missile, right? The missile is, like, kind of whatever, but the halberd beam is one of my probably my favorite weapon in the game, to be honest. And so I think that really elevates it, because you can totally use that to the late game. You don't have to swap anything out. You just have to get more weapons. But I think it's awesome. It's got a really interesting layout, and it starts with 3 Zoltan, I think. Or it starts with Zoltan, right, which is obviously awesome. It's free power. And so that's always good. All right, the Lanius A, I'm trying to remember the exact layout for it. I think it's okay. I think, you know, having Lanius crew can be good. It's a little hard sometimes, you know, to manage your crew with other non-Lanius aboards because of the oxygen sucking thing. but I think it's okay. It's a really big ship, and it starts with, I think the, let's see, this is the one with the advanced flag. This is the one, I don't remember. All right, you know what? We're gonna pull up on the, let's see here, FTL ship layouts. I haven't played this one as much, but I definitely think it's okay. You know, it's really, it's not too bad. It's not too hard to unlock either, which is really good. You just have to, I think, unlock 3 ships, so not too bad here. All right, Stealth A, I think it's decent. You know, in the video I did of it, it starts out really weak in terms of not having shields, right? But that's really not too big a deal in most of the time, because you start with cloaking, which is like really helpful, and it lets you negate a lot of damage. Having no shields is a bummer, but it has, I mean, in the video I did with it, I literally use like almost the starting weapons to like finish the whole game, right? But I think the cloaking right off the bat really makes it pretty decent. You know, maybe I'll put it down and see, because the disadvantage of it is it's small. It only has 3 weapon slots and 3 it's 3 weapon slots, and then like not as much system room, so it's a little small, it's a little cramped. It starts with just humans, but I do think it's pretty decent. I put it middle of the road. The cloaking is what obviously carries it. Other than the cloaking, though, when you really look at it, it's kind of not that good, but you know, it's mid-tier. All right, the Rock A, I'm going to put in D tier. It's not terrible. It has the Rock Plate augment. It starts with Rock Crew, who are pretty good. Its biggest problem, though, is it only has missile weapons at the start, which can be really, really detrimental. Because when you only have missile weapons, I mean, they're good while you have ammo, but once you run out of ammo, you're screwed. And since the game is pretty dependent on RNG, without missiles, you're kind of just sitting in the water. You know, there's really just nothing you can do. But I still think there are worse ships out there, definitely, and I think you can make it work, but I would rather pick most of the other ships above it in like every single situation. So next we have the Slug A, the Man of War. I think it's decent. It's got kind of an interesting layout, and it starts with the dual lasers and the anti-bio beam. I think it has a bomb of some sort too, which is good. So Slug Crew people sleep on Slug Crew. They're not the best race in the game, but they're not terrible to have. Really, having it 1 is all you need, though, because of the sensor ability it has. I think the way this ship wants you to play with the anti-bio beam to like kill enemy crew is kind of hard to like. It's a very niche strategy that I don't think really works that well. So because of that, I think I'm gonna put it in D tier as well, because it starts out like just kind of weak. You know, you can try to do the anti-bio beam shenanigans and like a breach bomb. Pretty much it wants you to kill enemy crew, right? But you don't have boarding, so you have to use the anti-bio beam, the breach bomb to like suffocate them. It does have slug repair gel. I think all the slug ships do, which is like pretty good, honestly. It's one of my favorite augments. That it's like, other than like, you know, pre-igniter or Zoltan shield, it's really good. Just it's like a passive thing to have. You don't have to worry about breaches at all, but that's in the layout, and having some slug crew is really the only thing that keeps it. It's just not that. It doesn't start out that strong. It's kind of hard to use. Mantis A, I think, is an A tier ship. However, why? It starts with boarding, which is obviously really, really good. And like I said, I'm not a massive boarding fan. I prefer to just go the gunship route. But I do think it's still a really, really good ship. Its disadvantage that keeps it from S tier is it's got a 2-man boarding room, so you can only put 2 over at a time. It does have weapons. The weapons are like pretty bad, but it does have them at least, so you can maybe get those online. But starting with so many Mantis and an Engi actually is pretty helpful. It allows you to really do some serious damage to enemy crews early on. So I think it's a really, really good ship. If you want to start getting into boarding or getting better, definitely start with this ship. I think it's probably your best bet early on, instead of just buying boarding on another ship. But yeah, the Gila monster is pretty good. All right, Crystal A, I think is an S tier ship. I think both the Crystal ships are really, really good. for a couple of reasons. They're like impossible to unlock, but I did get them, you know, perfectly legit, which is cool. It was definitely worth it because I think the crystal ships are really fun. Starting with Crystal Crew is good, and their starting weapons are really, really good because they like pierce shields, so it's just like you just ruin every ship early on. It's such a good ship. The layout is a little weird, but it's whatever. Starting with 2 crystals, good. I don't even know if they have any blue events except maybe like for their quest. So, you know, in terms of that. But the Crystal Crewman like lockdown ability that they have is actually really, really useful. You know, you kind of sleep on it sometimes, but it can be really helpful for dealing with borders. So I think with that and its weapons, it starts with decent, you know, like power and systems. And the Crystal Vengeance augment it has is like pretty good. It's not great. I would sell it if I had to for money, but it's like free damage every once in a while. Like every time you get hit, there's a 10% chance to like shoot off a crystal. But it's a really, really good ship. So that's awesome. All right, Kestrel B, I think is also an A tier. It's a little different than the Kestrel A, but I think it's still pretty decent. It starts with 4 basic lasers. So essentially you have 4 lasers immediately, and yes, they only shoot 1 at a time, but having 4 separate ones is really good because you can target a bunch of systems. You know, early on you have 1 laser take down their shields, and then you have 3 lasers that can just take down whatever else you want. It also starts with a Zoltan, which I always love. It's free power. Lots of blue events for that, and a Mantis, which is also pretty decent for boarding. The layout, I actually quite like the layout, to be honest. It has those funky airlocks right by the pilot, which is kind of weird. It has, yeah, I just think it's a pretty good ship. I don't think it's the best ship out there, but I think the Red Tail, the Kestrel B, is really pretty good, you know, and it's cool. It's like a rebel, you know, cruiser design-wise. All right, the Engi B. I think it's definitely worse than the Engi A. Why? Mostly because it only has like a drone crew. You know, you kind of have to manage like system repair drones, and you have 1 crew member, which means you can't really go as ballsy with some events. If like you lose your only crew member through an event, then like game over, right? And having to rely on system repair drones is like really annoying. So I think it's really not that good. I mean, it starts with like the heavy ion and the heavy laser, which is like an okay weapon setup. But I think having to rely on so many drones is not... It's kind of hard early game. Plus the ship's like really small for like no reason. Like I'm looking at an image of it, and like it's just the rooms are all so tiny. Yeah, so I don't think it's that good. I'm gonna put it in D tier. I think it's kind of hard to get going initially. You know, again, most of these ships by the late game you can completely change their build, and like, you know, it doesn't matter. But I think this one starts off and doesn't have a lot of room for growth. The Engi A is way better for sure. Okay, Federation B, I think is also really good. I honestly, you know what? I might prefer it to the Federation A. I might have to do a run with it at some point because, yeah, I kind of like it a lot. I still think it's a little worse than the A variant, mostly because like, although I like the layout, I think the layout is kind of wonky. It has like its main airlocks are like in the middle, like right here, you know, which is kind of whack. Its whole thing really is that it starts with bonus artillery beam power. But as I said, when I played the Federation cruisers, I used the artillery as like supplemental damage. I don't really rely on it, so that doesn't help me out too much. The starting weapons are considerably worse than the Federation A because that starts with the Burst Laser Mark II. And yeah, I will say it does have a Zoltan crew, and starting with a Slug is kind of good because you don't get Slugs that often compared to like Engis or Mantis or Zoltan. So starting with one is kind of nice to have right off the bat, and having the Zoltan is obviously really good. So it's definitely a really, really good ship. I do think the A variant is slightly better, but you know, having said that, I think it's still definitely worth it, and it's definitely one of the better ships in the game, I would say. So Zoltan B here, I think I like better than the Zoltan A. And I think it's also an S tier ship. You know, the disadvantage of it, of course, is that it has a really expensive first bar of shields that you need to buy. I think it's like 100 to get your actual first bar of shields, but it does technically have shields already, so it's not like the stealth one where you have to buy it at a system. It's just you can save up. And I think the dual ion blasts plus the pike beam is like a really, really good weapon combo. 2 ion blasts can take down like any layer of shields. I think I did a video on this ship. And the pike beam can totally be used till the end. Plus, again, it has the Zoltan shield. I think the layout's like pretty cool too, with the weird little like side rooms with the engines, oxygen, and sensors and everything like that. Although I prefer it, do I think it's better than Zoltan A? I don't know, man. They're pretty close. Yeah, I think the Zoltan A is a little better just because it does already start with shields, and I think the Halberd beam is slightly better than the pike beam. So I think it's an A-tier ship again. We're starting off pretty strong here, by the way. You may notice there's a very top-heavy list, but I think it's a really good ship. You know, I think the disadvantage of not having the first layer of shields obviously is a bummer, but with the Zoltan shield and the weapon setup you have, you can break through pretty easily most ships' defenses without getting hit yourself. Okay, so next we have the Lanius B. I think the Lanius B is another... It's got a lot going on. But I mean, the advanced flak that it starts with is like pretty good. I think just having that is a little bit worse than what the Lanius A has, just like a chain laser and the ion stunner. It does have boarding already, which is kind of good, but it also, I don't know, I think just having the advanced flak and relying on, like, Lanius are not that good at boarding. They're good at boarding. They're one of the better races, definitely. But Rock and Mantis are way better, definitely. And it starts with a clone bay, which I prefer the med bay in most situations, because a lot of the times you can't heal your crew. I think the med bay is better for boarding. Some people say it's the clone bay. I think the med bay is better because, yes, if your crew dies on the ship, they can just come back to life with the clone bay. But the big problem is, on a ship where you're reliant on boarding, with the clone bay, you board the ship, right? You beat them up, you win. Your crew's at like, 15, 25% health now. You make a jump, they get like 5% back. They're at 30%. You need to board this next ship now. You can't heal your crew, so they go in, they die, yeah, they come back, right? But they lose skills from that, and then it's like, it just throws your whole tempo off. So I think it's much harder to actually board effectively, like all the time. If you just board every once in a while, clone bay is like pretty good. But if you're like relying on boarding, which this ship, I'm not saying it makes you, but it's like it's kind of what it's going for, because it has mind control to help you as well. So I think it's actually a little worse than the Type A, in my opinion. It's not terrible. I mean, D tier is, this is like one of the best ships in the game. This is like really, really good ships. This is like pretty decent. This is like, very average. It has, it's nothing crazy, but it's good. This is like, I'd rather not use it. There are worse ships, but it's not great. This is like really, really bad, and this is like genuinely so bad you should never fucking use it. It's so garbage. It's like a challenge run just to play it. There will be at least one ship in here. Fear not. Alright, Stealth B. I think the Stealth B is pretty cool. Starts with the Glaive Beam, which is like really good. And it has cloaking, obviously. So you take some damage, right? It doesn't have nearly as good engine power as the Stealth A, which has 4 slots. This one only has 2. But the Glaive Beam like one-shots everything early game, assuming you use it smart to like hit their shields first. So I think it's pretty good. I think the Stealth A is a little better, just because you're charging the Glaive Beam, you cloak. First of all, when you cloak, you're not going to have 100% dodge right off the bat. Just because you don't have as much engine power. So I do think, I think I'm going to move the Stealth A up to B, like I said initially. I forgot they have long-range scanners. That really boosts it up. To start with cloaking and long-range scanners, those are like 2 of the best things to have in a run already. I think these ones are still a little better just because it doesn't have shields right off the bat, and it's kind of a small ship. And I'm going to put the B variant in the C tier. I think it's just a little bit worse, but it's still average. It's not terrible, not great. The Glaive Beam is really fun to use, but it is kind of like hard to use with other stuff. Like this ship already has 4 weapon power, so you're already like, it's gonna cost like fucking 70 or 80 to get. I don't know, maybe it's like 60 to already get a new weapon, which is a lot. But it is not terrible. All right, moving on, we have the Rock B here. Now the Rock B's kind of catch is that it doesn't have airlocks, so you have to put out fires manually. With your rock crew, you also can't vent borders, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with that stuff. Having said that, rocks as a crew are very durable. Obviously, they're immune to fire, so it's like whatever. Or it's not whatever, right? But it is less annoying, and they got a lot of health, so borders aren't as bad. I think the layout's kind of decent, honestly. So I don't think it's nearly as bad. Plus, it has a firebomb and a heavy pierce, which is like a special weapon that pierces one layer of shields. I think it's actually better than the Rock A. Not having to rely only on missile weapons takes it up quite a few notches, definitely. Plus, I mean, the ship looks so badass. Like, look at this. I think it is better. I don't think it's a B tier. I think it's a mid tier one. Not having airlocks for fires is like whatever, but not having airlocks for borders, even though it's good to fight your borders a lot of the time, it means like even if you can't even vent them to force them into the med bay like I do sometimes, where you open up all doors except the med bay, forcing the borders to go in the med bay and fight you there to get combat experience. So it makes events like that a lot harder. And you know, when you're just at an event that's like only borders, it's not that bad. But if you're like actually fighting an enemy ship while having to deal with borders, it can be kind of hard. So that does bring it down a bit, but I don't think it's too bad. And I like fire-based weapons like the firebomb and the fire beam, so I think it's pretty cool in that regard. Oh baby, here we go. All right, this has got to be F tier, right? Let me just look at it again to make sure. But I mean, like, the Slug B is so bad. So let me just go through all the problems with this ship, right? The only weapon it has that does damage is the Artemis, right? So it's reliant on missile-based weapons, okay? The other weapon it has is the heal bomb. However, you also do not have a med bay or a clone bay. So the only way to heal your crew is to use a finite resource, the heal bomb. But that also means it's using finite resources that you need to attack the other ship with your Artemis missile launcher. So you are just hemorrhaging ammo, right? And then the ship tells you, well, no, we have a boarding system. We have a teleport. So you could board them with your Slug crew, which, first of all, are not even that good at boarders. And you only have 3 to begin with. So you have to send 2 over as mid-tier combat boarders. And then to heal them, you have to use the heal bomb. It's just so ridiculously annoying to use. It takes so long to kill things. It's just, it's so bad. The strategy with this ship is to immediately stop using the strategy it gives you. Is to try to get a better weapon and just not worry about that. So it's really dependent on RNG. You know, if you get an early flak or burst laser or like a beam or something, you're sitting pretty mostly. You can kind of just do a normal run then. But trying to do the strategy that they give you is just never going to work. So this is definitely one of the worst ships in the game. It looks kind of cool, like color-wise. I think it looks cooler than the Slug A, but like that's not going to save it. All right, Mantis B. Mantis B is probably the best boarding ship in the game. I think that's kind of undisputed. Looking at it, it has the massive 4-person boarding room, which is awesome. It only starts with 2 Mantis, though, which is kind of a bummer. And it has no weapons. So pretty much, it does have a boarding drone and a drone system, so you can do that. It's a little harder to get off at the start, right? Because it literally, you have to board. A lot of times you'll just have to send over like 1 or maybe both of your Mantis and just leave your ship completely empty and hope they don't shoot down your fucking boarding. But it does also have level 2 shields right off the bat, which is really good. So it's a little wonky at the start, but it is a really, really good ship. I think if you're a newer player, I would go with the Mantis A if you're going to do boarding. I think it's a little better. But I think this is also a really, really good ship for boarding. It's a little, like, you're not really going to be transitioning to a full-on gunship like I usually do if you're playing the Mantis B. I think it's more suited to having a little bit of weaponry as, you know, take down their weapons maybe. But focus heavy on boarding. Get 4 Mantises, train them all up, and just ruin them. Plus, the med bay is right next to the teleporter, which is just a small bonus that's super helpful. So, and a defense drone off the bat. I think it's really good. I think, for me personally, I would rather play any of these 3 ships than this one, but I still think it's a really good ship. It's definitely an A tier. A lot of people, some people might be like, what the heck, bro, put it in S tier. I'm not doubting it. I think it's really good. I just think it's, although like boarding is better in terms of it gets you more rewards than just blowing the enemy ship up. But I think it's a little bit more, you know, highfalutin. You got to focus a little bit more like finesse, I guess. So it's a little harder to use than just blowing people up with the Federation A or the Crystal Cruiser. But it's still a very good ship, definitely. Do not look down on it. And the Crystal B here, I think it's like another boarding ship, kind of. It's also a very, very good ship. It doesn't have any weapons either, and it literally only has boarding. It has the 4-person boarding. But you have Crystal Crew, who are like kind of like slightly weaker rocks, but they also have the, you know, lockdown ability. So not starting with any weapons is kind of hard. Boarding, I think I'm not gonna say I undervalue boarding. I just think boarding can be a little bit more challenging, especially since I kind of do more tutorial videos here. I think for someone who's picking up the game, I mean, first of all, if you're picking up the game, you're not going to have this ship unlocked for like ever. But regardless, I think it's a little bit harder to use. I still think, again, it's very good. You can do some pretty sizable damage. I think if you're going to go for like a no weapon style boarding cruiser, I think the Mantis B is slightly better. The big draw of this is it has the crazy powerful 2 crystal weapons, which are like really, really good and can use for a long time. I think this one is slightly worse. The red crystal look is pretty sexy though, but do I want to put it in B tier? I feel like it's not that bad, but I don't know. B tier is still good. Like, I still think it's pretty decent. I think the Gila monster here is better than the Crystal B in a lot of ways, so I think it's still good, but I think if you're going to be doing like a fully committed boarding run, I think just go for the Gila monster. Starting with the level 2 shields and starting with drones is slightly better than this one, which has nothing except boarding. Really, you know, it has cloaking, actually, I guess. I kind of forgot about that. Cloaking is pretty good, but I still think the Gila monster is going to be your best bet. All right, so on to the Kestrel C. Now, the Kestrel C, I think, is probably the worst of the Kestrel variants because of a couple things. Now, generally, like I said, I prefer Medbay to Clone Bay, but it's not that big a deal. This one is not a boarding ship. We're back to normal gunships. It has less cool crew diversity than the Kestrel B, in my opinion. It only has 2 humans and a Lanius. Lanius can be good, obviously, but its weapon setup is definitely considerably worse than the other 2. It has a ion stunner and dual lasers, which is okay. It's definitely like average or above. It's like not bad early game, but compared to like having 4 lasers like here, or having the burst laser and a Lido missile launcher, or is it? No, it's an Artemis, right? Yeah, Artemis. It's definitely a little bit worse. So I think it's still decent. I still think it's pretty okay. You can definitely make it happen. The weapon setup is more than okay. But I think it's the worst of the 3. I think it's probably B tier. I couldn't put it in C tier. I think it's better than... Do I? Yeah, I think it's probably better than these. It's decent. It's definitely, you know, relatively decent. Okay. So NGC. I don't know, man. I think it's probably better than NGB because it has the dual lasers and the beam drone, which is like... That's probably better than starting with... Well, I don't know. This is kind of a hard one for me. It does have 2 Engi, which is really good. It has a Lanius again. The room layout is like really, really weird, but it's not bad necessarily. Still got the loop thing that we got going on. I think it's better than NGB, definitely. I think it's probably worse than NGA, just because, I mean, it has the Clone Bay, which is okay, but I'm kind of a Clone Bay hater, not gonna lie. I think it's okay in certain situations, but I just like having my crew all the way healed up. I don't like having to go into a next, even though they'll be revived if they die, going into a next encounter with like 50% HP. There's just nothing you can do about that with the Clone Bay. So, plus I always like forget to power it up because I'm used to having the Med Bay not powered. The beam drone is like pretty decent. It ruins ships probably more than like a regular combat drone does. So I think it's definitely okay. I think it's a C tier ship. You know what? Maybe it's a B tier ship. It has defense scrambler and hacking too. I think it's a B tier. Yeah. I think if we're doing this like chronologically, the NGA is still a little better, but I think it's pretty decent. It's way better than the NGB. All right, Federation Cruiser Type C is okay. It's where the Federation Cruiser kind of falls off, because it's another no weapon boarding cruiser. Now it has the flak artillery, which is like really unique and like pretty cool, honestly. And you kind of need to build around that a bit more. But I think something I should say, I guess, a lot of the Type C ships they were all added after the Advanced Edition came out, so they were all trying to make use of the new stuff. So a lot of them have hacking, a lot of them, they all have clone bays, right? And they have like crazy stuff like that. So in general, most C layouts I like less than the A and B ones. I think the flak is still, not the flak, the Federation C is like pretty decent, I would say. But I think it's definitely considered to be probably worse than the other two. What tier do I want to put it in though? I think it's around C tier. I think it's probably, I don't know, man. Like the whole no weapon use boarding is done so much better by the Crystal B and the Mantis B. And yes, it has the flat cannon thing. So I think I'll put it in C. It's not terrible. It has a decent layout. It has a pretty good crew with 2 Zoltan, Mantis, and a human. But I do think that it's definitely way worse than its other variants. All right, Zoltan C. This one I actually kind of like too. Its thing is it doesn't have enough reactor power. It has to use the backup battery. Like I said, the Type Cs all have the kind of new stuff. So the reliance on the backup battery initially is kind of annoying, for sure. And its weapon setup is like not that great. It's like it's got the charge ion and the beam drone. So it's like okay, but when you compare it to the other 2 Zoltan ships, like it is way worse. Starting with 4 Zoltan is obviously good, but I do think that if you're going to pick a Zoltan ship, the A and B are both way better bets. The layout is like pretty decent, honestly. I kind of do like the layout quite a bit. The layout is probably better than the Zoltan A layout, but still. I think because its weapons are substantially less viable, or like anything that relies on a drone is kind of a bummer. But it has the backup battery, I guess, for what it's worth. And it's got a beam drone instead of a combat drone, so it's got that going. And of course, it has the Zoltan shield, so you can never discount that. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's another C tier. Maybe it's a B tier. I think it's a B tier. Honestly, the charge ion is not that bad of a weapon. And the beam drone, it's going to ruin ships early on with the Zoltan shield. And you can get reactor power fairly easily. So I don't think it's that bad. I think it's a B tier. I would not mind using it. The Zoltan shield itself elevates it so much. It's just such a broken augment. And then here we go with the Stealth C. I think the Stealth C is pretty bad. Mostly because it like just doesn't have stealth. Like it doesn't even have cloaking. Like the whole gimmick of the Stealth A and B is it has no shields, but it has cloaking. This one just has no shields or cloaking. So it's just kind of super bad. What it does have has long-range scanners, as they all do, which is like good. The charge laser and mini beam is like a decent early game setup. I've seen better, I've seen worse. Its kind of gimmick, I guess, is it relies on the shield overcharger drone, and it has an anti-drone drone. So if the enemy ship has like a combat drone. But here's the thing, right? The game gives you these like fun little quirky strategies, a lot like Slug B here. That you can, but you don't have shields, but you can use the Shield Plus drone and the anti-drone drone. Why? I don't want to use that. It's a very circumventive strategy that the ship looks badass. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a strategy that like you don't really want to use. It's kind of a challenge ship. I think it's not that great, really. I don't know. Yeah, it's better than this just because it at least has like better weapons, and the Shield Plus drone. I mean, you can use it. It does work. It starts with a rock, a slug, and a human, which is like a decent little crew thing. So I think it's definitely the absolute worst of the stealth cruisers by far. It's better than the Slug B for sure. but it's still really just like it's trying too hard. That, you know, obviously, like, if you want to play the game with it, go ahead. But if you just want to beat the game, like, you should never. If you're going to beat the game with a stealth cruiser, use either of these over this. All right, in the Rock C here, we're getting near the end. The Rock C is cool because it has a crystal crew member. It's like a little peace offering between the two. It's got a funny layout, but it does have the crystal heavy weapon, which is pretty decent. And it has a swarm missile. And it has airlocks, unlike the Rock B. So I think this is honestly the best Rock cruiser out there. Its disadvantages, it doesn't really have any like obvious disadvantages. Its weapon system's pretty good. It has rock plating the augment, which is like pretty decent. You know, it's like titanium casing on the stealth ship. I would sell it if I had to. It's not game breaking, but 15% chance to just not take hull damage is like pretty okay. And yeah, starting with 2 rocks and a crystal is like pretty good. So I really don't have, it's not, you know, amazing. It doesn't have anything outstanding, but it's definitely pretty decent. So for that, I think I'm going to put it in B tier, you know. It's definitely the best of the Rock ships. This is one of the few ships that has like a reverse thing, the A, B, and then the C. Normally I would probably put the A or B higher and the C lower, but I think this is definitely the best ship. Plus, for those who didn't know, this ship is a really good way to unlock the Crystal Cruiser, because you can bypass a whole step of it by renaming your Crystal Crewman Rowan, I think it is, or Ruin, which is the name of the guy you get out of the escape pod. That way you can skip the whole finding the escape pod event and just hopefully get to the last part. It'll take a couple tries still, but if you don't want to do it fully legit, you can definitely use this ship to do that strategy. Which is now, I'm not taking it in with the ranking, but this is a pretty decent ship for the Rock Cruiser. Alright, so the Slug C here. It's better than the Slug B, I definitely think. It's a little weird, but it at least has a chain laser, which is like, I would say just having a chain laser is kind of not that good early on. It's good enough to take out level 1 shields, but that's about it. After that, it becomes useless. However, it does also start with mind control and hacking. So hacking is something that you definitely would like to have by the end of the flagship fight. So starting off with that is good. It's not as good as cloaking, but it is pretty good. And it'll allow you to take down a bunch of shields with it. And mind control, in my opinion, is not game breaking, but it is something that's nice to have. I usually don't buy it on my runs, but starting with it is okay, and it can be used, you know, in lots of good ways. You can mind control boarders. You can unmind control your own crew by mind controlling them back. You can just mind control like enemies and have them beat up their own system. So it's actually pretty decent. It's one of the few ships that kind of relies on mind control in a lot of ways. So I think, and it's got slug repair gel. I think this is it the best, or is the Slug A? The Slug A is, honestly, it might be better than the Slug A. Slug A has like the weird bio weapon, which is like you don't really use that much. The dual lasers are kind of shit. So weapon wise, it's about the same in terms of like how garbage it is or how good. But having those other systems is good. I think it's about the same. I think it's still not great, but I think I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think it's got merits to it. I think there's definitely a lot worse ships that you could have. It also starts with level 2 doors, which is something I always never remember or notice, which is just awesome to have, you know. And finally, we have the Mantis C Cruiser. Now, the Mantis C also has a 4-person boarding, but it has a clone bay, so it's a little different than the Gila Monster, which is the Mantis B. And it definitely does not have as good of a crew for boarding. It has a Mantis, yes, and it has a Lanius, but it's kind of hard to have a Lanius and a non-Lanius board together because of the oxygen thing. So it makes it a little harder to do a boarding run. You either have to just send over your Mantis at the start, which is like only sending over one guy is kind of whack because he gets outnumbered on enemy ships, or just send one Lanius. It's a little harder to make the boarding happen, definitely, I would say. Its weapons are like, it has 2 bomb weapons, the lockdown bomb and the stun bomb, which are like, just kind of like they don't really do any damage to the ship. It's a ship that's very like boarding dependent, yet doesn't really have good boarding options. It has a level 2 clone bay, which is like okay, I guess. I think it's the worst of the Mantis ships by far. I think it's really not that great, honestly. I think it's a D tier. And so yeah, with that is my list for the ships in FTL. You know, all the ships are viable. in some way, in terms of like they put them in the game, you know, to be used. And even like crappy ones, there's like a way you're supposed, like they give you the tools you're supposed to use. You know, this one has the Zoltan shield drone, this one has the healing bomb, so it's like it tells you what you're supposed to do, but some of them are worse than others, definitely. So let me know if you guys agree. There is obviously a bunch of subjectivity in this. Some ships I probably undervalued, some I overvalued, but I think in my experience with my, you know, hundreds of hours in the game, I think these are, if you're looking to play any ship, I would start up here and avoid these ones unless you want to go for a challenge run. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed watching. It's a lot of fun to make. I might do like a weapon one. I don't know what else I would do after that. A crew one. I mean, I could tell you right now. Engi, Zoltan, S tier. Rock, A tier. Slug, Mantis, B tier. Rest, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I might do a weapon one. That could be kind of fun too. But yeah, this is what I think for the FTL ships. Hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know how much you absolutely hate my decisions. Thank you so much. Bye.